And thank you for joining me for today's live reading of Three Women in November by Jim Shomos. And this is presented by Itsy Bitsy Book Bits. Chapter 1, Align Your Palms with Silver. Her soul mama laugh burst through Leo's foggy head. Deep, physical sound waves pulling him into a virtual group hug with everyone else in hearing range across the hotel's expansive lounge area. Leo shifted in his seat towards the epicenter. A few yards behind, the focal point amongst a group of women in armchairs, her huge cheeks and shoulder-length wavy black hair danced to the rhythm of her laugh. His soul scrambled for its dancing shoes. Who is she? Pumped with antibiotics and flu tablets, he'd skipped the official Digilab introductions as he needed to crash after arriving in Bateman's Bay. He shouldn't have flown up from Melbourne. Shouldn't have been on the 3-hour bus ride to the resort. Shouldn't be buzzing from a once-in-a-lifetime laugh. Who is she? She wasn't one of the other mentors. He'd read up on the 4 international digital media gurus and knew his 3 Aussie colleagues. Wouldn't have missed her photo amongst the 8 creative teams participating from film, TV, theater, and publishing. As the laughter settled, her gaze drifted across the room. Not great timing. With the green feminine scarf he'd wrapped over his head and the trinkets arranged on the table in front of him, he must have looked like a bedraggled gypsy at a Middle Eastern bazaar. I'll line your palms with silver, she said, deep and husky, how a cheeky grin would sound in silk lingerie. Come here and say that. For a moment, Mystery Woman seemed surprised by their mutual cheekiness, then unleashed her smile. As big and warm as her laugh, it wrapped around his heart in a nanosecond. I have to meet her. Get up now, stroll over, and ahoy there, gypsy, we've come to loot your bounty. He wrenched his eyes from Mystery Woman as Raph and his teammates dropped plastic gold medallions onto his table. They had been quick. Too quick. Digilab leader Giga had given Leo the low-energy role of seller in his traditional icebreaker game. The 8 project teams and 7 other mentors had to solve riddles in the virtual and real world to collect medallions hidden outside Zuzella Cliff Resort, then exchange them for trinkets which each team would use in a short play after dinner. By the time Leo had sold his merchandise to all the teams, exhaustion and achy bones set up camp in his body again. His mission was survival Sunday, manage Monday, flying by Friday. He needed another round of legal chemicals or he wouldn't survive Sunday. Or maybe that smile. He turned around as casually as he could toward Mystery Woman, but she'd left. Left a massive void in the lounge area and a ton of curiosity in his heart. Who is she? Zoya Orlenko. Leo had extracted some info out of Giga. As the CEO of shiny new government body Digital Media Australia, Zoya was a major VIP. Despite only being in the Canberra-based role just 2 weeks, she'd already invested DMA funds to cover all food and drinks for the Digilab, including the Friday night party. She'd obviously done her research on Giga and the 6-day residential workshops he created before she started the role. A burst of her laugh tested the restaurant's floor-to-ceiling windows and triggered his smile. Zoya mingled among the tables while participants and mentors gobbled their breakfast before the 5 intensive days of the lab kicked off. They promised 6 megabits, but we're not even getting 1, said Giga, who didn't earn his nickname by accident. He nodded while sneaking glances over Giga's shoulder. Zoya Orlenko. A strength to the name and definitely European ancestry, Eastern or Baltic, late 30s, maybe 40. A high forehead added to her regal air. I'll have to redesign half my presentation if the hotel doesn't get their act together, said Giga. Yeah, frustrating. Will she be here all week? Do you have her making a presentation? No idea. Zoya did her intro yesterday while you were napping. We bring in experts from all over the world to talk about new media, and we can't even give them a decent internet connection. In 2006. That's ironic. Eating the muffin? Trimmed bacon rinds were the only remaining evidence on Giga's main plate. 3 pastries and a blueberry muffin crammed his other plate. He wasn't overweight, just a huge guy with an uncanny likeness to the actor who played Ray's brother in the TV show Everybody Loves Raymond. Giga shook his head. Leo put the muffin on his plate and cut it in half, then cut the bottom section into 4 pieces, then the juicier top into 4, which he always left for last. He enjoyed it from memory because his taste buds were one of the casualties of the flu. Zoya headed to their table. He'd taken another bucket of meds earlier, but her approach blasted him past managing Monday to buzzing again. Maybe I should just stand and introduce myself. Zoya answered for him. She stopped at their table, dropped to her knees, and threw a short, businesslike half smile at him. Sorry, I just need a quick word with Giga. She turned to Giga before he could think of a response. Keep her attention. Hold on to those eyes. I was hoping we could plan our strategy for the dinner on Thursday. Her tone contained tigers. Thump-a-thump, thump-a-thump, went the jungle drums in his heart. Are you here tomorrow? Asked Giga. She shook her head. Any time this morning? Now's good, Giga waved across to him. Have you met Leo? Leo, this is Zoya. Zoya offered her hand. She held on a bit longer than a normal business greeting, a strong grip but welcoming skin. Thump-a-thump, thump-a-thump, thump-a-thump. His mind scrambled for something funny or romantic. Clever. He could work with clever. You look different without the scarf, she said. He'd settle for mildly interesting. All he could do was grin. Zoya unleashed her full, light-up-a-village smile. Their window table overlooked a shimmering Bateman's Bay, but the magnified spring sun couldn't match the warmth she launched through him or the light sparkling from her brown eyes. Look at that smile. What a perfect way to start the day. His romantic muse and ego high-fived. The light in her eyes intensified, like she was trying to shine more understanding on what this stranger dared to say. What a charmer. Her tone wasn't dismissive, a light cadence. Attention-seeking cheeks were crimson moons to her sun's smile. Zoya turned back to Giga, and the sun spun away to another universe. Do you want to do it here? She asked. Despite being left in the cold in this corporate conversation, Leo could only admire. She was comfortable interrupting breakfast between two men for her agenda. By kneeling, she showed a non-corporate, almost girlish friendliness, yet she was on a mission. Zoya lost nothing for being on her knees. Not many women could have pulled that off. Sure. Do you mind if Zoya takes your seat? Asked Giga. Bastardo. Why can't he invite me to stay? I could find another chair for her. No, of course not. Smiling at Zoya, he got up, and as she sat down, he squinted hard at Giga. Giga snatched his last pastry, then let him be. Zoya Orlenko, I've got to find a way to meet you properly. Chapter 2. Melbourne, New York, Sydney, Canberra, Leo. Leo was mesmerized by the waves crashing against rocks at the bottom of the cliff. He hadn't had time to soak up the resort's spectacular location, high on a small peninsula off the bay. He wasn't a surfer or into fishing, but loved the waves. There was something intoxicating about their relentless persistence. He tried to bump into Zoya on Thursday night after the power dinner with Giga and her government department head, but never got the opportunity. Tonight was his last chance. He turned around and leaned back on the timber balustrade. The large balcony hummed with mentors and participants high on adrenaline, lubricated with alcohol. Giga had not only created an innovative 6-day lab, he'd also structured it to mirror the real world. The participants start the week curious or skeptical, then move into a creative high as they embrace the new digital playing field. By Friday, emotions range from anxious to frantic because the teams had to pitch their revamped, digitized, and interactive projects to a VIP industry panel. The presentations were a success, releasing a monster wave of tension, leading to Friday evening party time before everyone headed home the next morning. Sitting at one of the long timber tables, Zoya's intensity focused on Juancho, a zany Canadian mentor and kindred Leo spirit. She was safe with him, the only person he'd mentioned his Zoya interest to. On her right, there was a gap on the bench seat, and then Janie, another fun mentor and Giga's right hand in the workshops. Perfect. He slid into the space and joined in with Janie's conversation. There was some fun banter with her and the others to his right. He was angled towards them and physically reacting to them, yet his soul was contorted in the opposite direction, watching Zoya. He felt her lean back and forward, heard her chuckle, followed her expressive hands. He sometimes felt he had a sixth sense, but right there it was a Zoya sense. His soul enjoyed every second of being that close. Time to test the love skies, see if their clouds connected. He turned and slid over towards Zoya, but Janie grabbed his arm. Hey, Yo-Yo, would you mind getting me another wine, please? Janie was the only person in his life who had tagged him with a nickname. At the first of these workshops, she yelled, "Hey, yo-yo," across the room and later explained he just looked like a yo-yo to her, like he was always going to bounce back up. It made her an instant friend. At that moment, he could have killed her, all primed for his approach to Zoya, but he couldn't refuse Janie. She slapped his back as she swung off the bench seat. "Just kidding, I'm going to the bar. Want another?" "I'm good, thanks." He held up his half-full glass of Pinot Gris. Janie patted Zoya's shoulder. "Since you're our host, can I get you another drink?" "Thank you, Janie. Another Pinot Gris, please." "Same wine. Good sign." Last woman he met who liked the same drink, he married. Although that didn't turn out so well, so maybe it wasn't such a good sign. "You remember our Melbourne star, Leo?" Bless Janie's socks. Zoya turned towards him. "Of course. Can you believe he's 46? Without makeup, too." Janie ran her hand over his smooth head, which he shaved when specks of gray started appearing a few years ago. "If I wasn't happily married, I'd take those chocolate biscuit eyes home myself." Maybe she'd gone too far. "Immaturity used to work against me, and now it's working for me," he said straight at Zoya. Her smile made his stomach yo-yo. "I've got some questions for you." She slid along the bench seat towards him. 6 days of waiting to get this close enough to kiss her natural artisan sculptured lips. Zoya flipped to a blank page on her black notebook, thick, shiny pen poised. "You want my number for your black book?" She jerked her head up, the sun setting behind her. It could have been setting in her eyes, her big cheeks tinged with crimson. "You really are cheeky with a capital CH." His Judas muscles broke out. She hadn't forgotten their ever so fleeting encounters. He had registered on her radar. "Thank you." Crimson cheeks turned red. She tapped the notebook with her pen. "This is my work buddy. Ideas, goals, meeting notes. She doth glare too much." Glint shined in her eyes. "And these are work questions." The slightest of smiles broke on her lips, yet the slightest smile on Zoya still showered him with a megadose of vitamin D. She morphed into work mode in an instant, probably her comfort zone. So many members in that modern sisterhood. "Congratulations on the Cannes Award." It still sounded weird 3 weeks later. Winning a Cannes Interactive Award for the prototype iPhone game he'd created, 8 Crocs, ages before the phone was to be released in Australia. "Thanks. I was lucky the 2 tech dudes I stumbled across came on board and made my crazy idea even crazier." Leo didn't mention he felt like a 46-year-old phony in the cool kids' playground. She rattled off the usual questions about 8 Crocs, funding models, revenue streams, marketing, and distribution. He could answer them on autopilot, but from Zoya they had a melody, and he was a sucker for a sweet tune. He wasn't technical or an academic. And the biggest crime of all, he wasn't even a gamer. He wanted to write humorous, clever pieces for magazines, maybe write a book one day. Frustrated with his inability to get any articles published, he turned up at a digital media seminar a year earlier. New online magazines and self-publishing opportunities intrigued him. The technology and process behind all of it scared him. He'd almost drowned with boredom from all of the digital terms and acronyms, but one speaker, Mark Pesci, connected in non-tech English and inspired an idea for a game. Through most of the other seminar geeky gobbledygook, he feverishly scribbled out his idea. While at the networking lunch, he met Jason. Jason lived for games and devoured technology, washing it down with gallons of Coke. At 25, he and his first cousin cum business partner, Nicholas, had already built up a niche animation and digital technology company, Pirate Bunnies. Introverted and totally non-business savvy, Jason and Nicholas created clever interactive animations for ad agencies. 8 Crocs was a silly game with 8 different jungle locations, levels in game speak. To successfully achieve each level, you had to navigate increasingly bizarre crocodiles. Being so early in the evolution of the iPhone, it wasn't difficult to break through as an Australian first. The Cannes success was a bonus, and they became the darlings of Victoria's Digital Media Fund. Success was a very relative term. In the 10 years since Leo had walked away from a lucrative sports marketing career, he'd never earned half of his old salary in a year, cash flowing his larger creative dreams with freelance copywriting for magazine, radio, and online ads. After paying for his kids' private school fees and other support, He often had more month than money. Being broke in your 40s wasn't fun, but it was for his kids and his dreams, and you can't beat that for a double mission. Zoya filled pages of her books with his ramblings. He respected this was still an important work function for her, yet that night was the last chance for them to connect before he flew back to Melbourne and she was swamped in Canberra. It wasn't something to rush, but they didn't have much choice. Raw desire wanted to lead the way, but his heart kept fighting for the driver's seat. Was she grappling with the same dilemma? Was he even in her thoughts beyond professional curiosity? She put her pen down and picked up her wine. He picked up the pen and slid her notebook across, flicked to a clean page. Enough about me. Tell me your story. Question marks flared in Zoya's eyes. He wasn't surprised she focused on her career journey. After an arts degree at Melbourne Uni, she packed her bags and headed to New York for an intern role with an ad agency. Flourishing in the never sleep competitiveness, she worked her way up to the senior TVC producer. Homesickness led her to Sydney as general manager of a large production company. His arithmetic, as she dropped unintended clues, suggested she was around 40 or 41. At first, you're seduced by the big personalities. Then you get worn out by the egos, greed, bullies, and more egos. So you took the Canberra gig for a bit of a retreat? Hardly. I'm over my head with admin and politics, but at least this job brings me closer to true artists. I admire people who create something from nothing. And for nothing, he almost added. Most so-called true artists had a perennial choice: starve our stomach or starve our soul. Zoya was distracted by her assistant. Excuse me a sec, she got up. He stared at the blank page on Zoya's notebook, then summarized her journey. Melbourne, New York, Sydney, Canberra, Leo. He almost drew a heart around his name, but tossed the idea. That was too much at this stage, even for him. He closed the black book, slid it across to Zoya's spot, and placed her pen on top. Maybe she won't see that till first thing Monday. It will put a smile on her face. Lucky colleagues that get to see that smile every day. Sorry, Leo, I've got to sort out some things with Beck before she leaves. With warm eyes, yet her mouth arched with genuine disappointment. He swung his legs around and joined her. Will you sit with me at dinner? Her perfume held a fruity scent. His nose was useless with details, but the fragrance and being that close made him tipsy. She shuffled back a half step, eyes sensually massaging his body. Do you even eat? You're so slim. He stepped close again. You have something against stamina? Her cheeks inflated into red balloons, a glimpse of tongue between lips. Maybe you can save me a seat. Zoya spun and glided after Beck. His heart glided after Zoya, and it wasn't the only part of his anatomy headed after her. Leo had to sit before the effect in his jeans was spotted by anyone.